Having a decent pair of shoes in your bug out bag, in your EDC or your emergency bag is so vital and yet often overlooked. The reason why people don't pack shoes in their bug out bag is because they think they'll have time to put some shoes on before they leave the house. The truth is that we often don't have time to dress ourselves before we leave in case of an emergency, and if you think I'm being funny, I've seen this recently. So family members of ours had to evacuate due to fire, and literally the only thing that they had time for was to grab their kids and go. Had they had emergency bags or a bug out bag, they might have been able to grab that too. That would have at least given them a pair of shoes to wear. In this video, I'm going to share with you what my choice pair of shoes are for my bug out bag and why. I'm Clarice, welcome to the Live Ready channel. How about we park over here? Now, no jokes, I've seen people firefight in the middle of the night in the bush with no shoes on, just because they did not have the time to actually put some shoes on. And the fact is, when we have an emergency, often the first thing that we think about is, what am I going to do about it? And what we should be thinking about is, how do I protect myself? How do I protect my body? And the clothing that you wear is the first layer or the first consideration that you actually have for shelter. Think about it, if you don't have a decent pair of shoes on and you end up injuring your feet, you end up injuring your ankle, you're out. There's no way for you to move around if you cannot be on your feet. Now, I've gone on a 3-day hike before where I was wearing a pair of shoes that weren't my own. I was very ill prepared. I was very young. It was one of the first hikes that I had done, and I ended up peeling the skin off of my heels, and I suffered that entire weekend. And the problem is, you actually risk infection that way, and once that infection becomes systemic, you get very ill. So the considerations around a decent pair of shoes are, firstly, what kind of environment do you foresee yourself being in? If you live in an area where in winter it snows a lot or it rains a lot and the conditions are really wet, then you really absolutely need to have a waterproof pair of shoes. The ideal is always to have some sort of waterproofing or water resistance as a bare minimum in a pair of shoes. And the other considerations around them are breathability. So very often we sacrifice the breathability for the waterproofness, and those of you who like to go camping with tarps know this very well. So the pair of shoes that I wear are the Craghoppers Salado Hi Boots. By the way, these are unisex. In fact, if you go onto Craghoppers' website, you will most likely actually find them under the men's section. And I'm actually going to take these off and show them to you today. I really think this is a magnificent pair of shoes, and when I was shopping around for my bug out bag, having had some experience in choosing shoes and hiking and wearing the same pair of shoes for multiple days, I decided that first of all I needed a very light pair of shoes. You can imagine when you pack a bug out bag and you're adding a set of clothes into your bug out bag for the emergency where you grab your bag and go, you have no time to get dressed, maybe you're in your pajamas, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you want a pair of shoes that are lightweight, because the more weight you add to your bag, the more difficult it actually becomes for you to carry your bag, especially over long distances. I wear Balega socks with them. Woolen socks are really great because they wick moisture away from your skin, so you don't end up with like a whole lot of dampness against your foot. So it is a little bit more healthy. Now, what Craghoppers has done is they've added something called a crawler guard, which I think is really cool. So this crawler guard over here basically fits over the top of the shoe like this, and it makes sure that insects and things like scorpions or spiders don't get into your shoes. There you go. You can go ahead and tuck the shoelaces in there as well. Just to get back momentarily to the weight of these shoes come in at around 500 grams a pair. So the entire pair of shoes is only 500 grams. So this is really a lightweight shoe. Hey? Yeah, are you very busy? Good doggy. Okay, so this crawler guard just tucks right into the tongue over there. The other thing that you look for when you're buying a pair of boots is the amount of flexibility in the sole. So you want something that is relatively flexible, that allows your foot to move, especially if you're going to be walking over rocky terrain, so that your foot sort of molds to the rocks and it isn't slippery. You don't glance off of the rocks. So when you do buy shoes, you give them a nice little bend and you see how much flex there is. So this has quite a lot of flex, and the reason why is they've got quite a thick EVA midsole, and the EVA midsole is a foam midsole. So what that adds is a bit of springiness and a bit of cushioning to your foot, but it also doesn't protect your foot from as much of the impact from the ground beneath. So you are going to feel quite a bit of what you're walking on because of the thick EVA midsole. And then they've added a Vibram outer sole, or the under part here. It's quite dirty. Now I've had these shoes for just over a year now, and I really love going on hikes with these shoes. I honestly won't buy any other thing than Craghoppers after having these boots, and I've had multiple hiking boots throughout my lifetime, and I really am so impressed with these boots, because not a single day have I been uncomfortable with in them, and not a single day have I had a blister or any sort of chafing or discomfort, and I really think they are brilliantly made. What else can I tell you while I've got my shoe off? Yeah, okay, so this little label over here that says Nosilife is basically a patent of Craghoppers. It's basically a technology that is insect repellent, and I can attest to that. I'm top to toe in Craghoppers today. Actually, my shirt is Craghoppers, my pants are Craghoppers. There has been a horsefly that hounded me on the way up here, and it sort of sat down on me and then took off again, unable to actually sting me. And if you guys remember my campsite selection video, I don't get along with horseflies really well. The upper is made of suede, and there's a bit of mesh over here. So the inner sole here is, I'm going to show you the inside of my shoe. The inner sole is molded, which is really nice. It is quite a narrow shoe, especially at the toe. So if you have a very wide foot, like a very wide foot, then you might find that this is a little bit tight to start off with, but because it is leather, it will eventually soften and mold to your foot. But that is what makes it nice for women. So because women tend to have narrower feet than men, we can easily take these boots and put them on, wear them without having a whole lot of extra room in your shoe. What I would recommend size-wise, these, I find them true to size. I've read some reviews about them that said that they are a little bit short, but I don't find that. What I would recommend though is that you always buy your hiking boots a half size to a size up of what you would buy an ordinary boot, so that you have the opportunity to put on an extra pair of, I don't know what that is on my foot, an extra pair of socks underneath or over your initial or your primary pair of socks, so that you've got double cushioning, especially if you're going to go really far in cold conditions. That will keep your toes nice and warm. So yeah, so while I've got the tongue out here, you can see that it is gusseted, and that is because of the aqua dry membrane that they've got in here, the water repellent system. You also don't want water running in through the tongue here. So when you are buying a pair of shoes, have a look that you have that, especially if they're high up on your ankle. You want them to at least give you protection up to sort of just above your ankle if they are high boots. Now these are really high boots. So Craghoppers makes a mid boot, and they used to make a low boot as well, exactly the same, but just I think the mid boot ends about there, and the low boot is basically the size of a running shoe or the height of a running shoe. The higher up the shoe sits on your ankle, the more protection it gives to that joint, and the less likely you are to sprain your ankle. So Craghoppers has rated these for moderate downpours or moderately wet conditions. I have worn them in some seriously wet conditions before, and I think the only reason why I ended up feeling that they were a bit wet on the inside is because I had my pants tucked into them. And what happens then is the water runs right down your pants into your boot, and you get some water on the top of your sock. So for serious downpours, they do actually stay dry unless you have your pants folded into your shoe. If you are in seriously wet conditions and you're planning for an expedition into wet weather, then perhaps look for something that has a Gore-Tex outer or a proper waterproof layer inside the shoe, and that will give you a bit more waterproofing. But I am really impressed with these boots. From a waterproofing perspective, I've stepped in puddles before. I haven't had water come into my shoe from stepping into puddles, but they're not the most waterproof boot that you're going to find. Also, they make these in sand color. They don't just come in this dark khaki or dark olive. They come in sand, they also come in gray. I don't know what kind of treatment they put on these shoes to get them to just wipe off and come clean, because suede usually can be quite tricky to clean, but they're not. They're just brilliant. The one criticism that I would actually give these shoes that I would have maybe initially before buying them thought, okay, maybe I'm not sure about these, is the toe guard. Doggy, are you liking me in the camera? What are you watching? So this little point here on the toe, I would have expected them to run it up a little bit higher on the toe, especially for when you're climbing over rocky areas, so that if you do stump your toe, that it doesn't damage the boot. But I haven't actually found that I have damaged the boot despite the lower toe guard. And you would think that it would go without saying, but please don't buy a pair of shoes and put them in your bug out bag and just leave them there without wearing them in. Probably the most important part of buying a pair of shoes for your bug out bag or for emergency situations would be actually wearing them in. So wear them in different conditions so that you get to know how they perform and what you should and should not do. Along with those shoes, you can keep 2 or 3 extra pairs of socks and some paracord to make up some extra shoelaces should your shoelaces break. So some of the areas that I can really say that these shoes have performed really well is a little bit of scrambling or rock climbing. Even though they're not rock climbing shoes by any stretch, they are really great for walking or climbing over boulders. Perhaps you remember my video on bugging out in a cave or finding caves to live in. There was quite a bit of scrambling along there, and not just into the cave but also over the boulders that ran around the cave, and it was really slippery wet conditions. And I must say, I don't think I've ever slipped in these boots. Actually, come to think of it, I've never slipped in these boots. So from a grip perspective, they are really excellent, especially in wet conditions. They do, however, take a bit of time to dry. So once they do get wet, even the outer part takes quite a bit of time to dry. Even though they have this aqua dry membrane, they are not 100% waterproof. They're not going to perform like a gum boot does in wet conditions. So yeah, that's my take on it. I really do love these shoes. Do let me know in the comments what your favorite shoes are. And remember that having a decent pair of shoes in your bug out bag or even in your get home bag is a vital piece of equipment if you want to stay mobile in any sort of emergency. So I'm going to post the link in the description to this video for these Craghoppers Salado Hi Boots. You could go and have a look at them. Do leave a comment below. Let me know what your favorite boots are and why. And until the next time, live ready.